My dad was so focused on becoming the perfect father to my stepsister that he accidentally left me at the mall in another state and went back home with her. I thought I was just another casualty of a messy divorce. However, one story my mom posted on Snapchat revealed something I didn't expect. Imagine being my father and you're just so caught up in your own life because you married a new woman. Now I have a stepmom and a stepsister, but you're so preoccupied with them that you forgot about me in a shopping mall 2 states away from our house. Nobody came to get me until you drove home and realized, oh my goodness, I forgot my daughter. Well, by then, it was too late because I had already told Grandma everything. I never thought I would ever find myself writing here, but life has a way of reminding you that you can't and won't always be in control. I have a bit of a dilemma, and it has caused trauma, so I need some advice and would like everyone's opinion and perspective. So, I'm 15F, and I've been living with my father for the past 3 years. Unfortunately, my mom filed for divorce 3.5 years ago, and I never got an explanation about why my mother just decided to divorce Dad and break up our family. My father's one condition was that he would have sole custody of me, which my mother shockingly agreed to. I have no ill feelings toward my mom despite not seeing her for over 3 years. We do talk from time to time, but it wasn't your typical mother-daughter relationship. However, my father always has something negative to say about my mom. He's constantly bashing her and loves comparing her to my stepmother, Jenna. It didn't take my father long to find someone else, you know, it never does. He and Jenna dated for about 3 months and then got married a month later. No one understood why my father was in such a rush to get married, especially since he had just gotten out of a long-term marriage. He claimed that he fell in love with Jenna at first sight and loved the kind of mother she was to her daughters, Joanne and Jenny. I know I'm the last person to judge or comment because I'm not a mother and only a teenager, but honestly, Jenna wasn't exactly Mother of the Year. She hardly ever spent time with my stepsisters and would spend her weekends shopping and pampering herself. She made it very clear to me that I shouldn't expect her to play a mother figure in my life, and I was 100% okay with it. What I was not okay with was how my father had changed. We used to be so close and do everything together, but now he spent all of his time and money on my stepsisters. He hardly made time for me, and his excuse was always that Joanne and Jenny grew up without a father and that he was trying to fill that void. My father has been neglecting me, and honestly, it's been really heartbreaking because there was no one I could talk to or turn to. I used to have a close relationship with my grandma, Alina, but after my father married Jenna, everything changed, and I haven't seen or heard from her since. We have each other on Facebook, but we hardly talk. My 16th birthday was coming up, and I wasn't excited about it. I was busy with my homework when my father came to tell me that dinner was ready. I told him I wasn't hungry because I knew Jenna had probably cooked a meal with meat, despite knowing that I'm a vegetarian. She never tried to accommodate me, so I always ended up making my own meals, which I didn't mind, but it would be nice if she could at least try. My father then told me that Jenna had spent the whole afternoon cooking dinner and that he would appreciate it if I showed her some appreciation. This led to an argument because I had to remind my father that I'm a vegetarian. He said I was just being difficult and that my being a vegetarian was just a phase. I brought up how neglectful he's been. I've been a vegetarian for the past 5 years, and this was something Jenna was well aware of. I asked my father to leave, and he responded by saying that I was difficult, just like my mother. Those words hurt, and my father noticed how my whole mood changed once he said that. He tried to apologize, but I told him I didn't want his apology. He eventually left me alone, and I continued with my work. Over the next few days, I noticed how my father was trying to apologize for what he said. He was being more attentive and attempted to spend more time with me, which I appreciated. I hardly ever got my father's attention, so I soaked up all this newfound attention, especially since it was the week of my birthday. I was shocked to find my father outside my school, waiting for me. I asked him what he was doing there, and he said he was taking me out for ice cream. The little girl in me screamed because this used to be one of our old traditions. He took me to our favorite spot, and we ordered our favorites. While we ate our ice cream, we started reminiscing about the good old days. My father then surprised me with a weekend road trip. He told me we'd be traveling to Seattle for my birthday. I was so excited because Seattle is one of my favorite cities. He said he had everything planned and that it would be just the two of us, which made me even happier. I honestly couldn't wait. I couldn't remember the last time I'd gone on a trip with just my father. The week went by fast, and it was finally Friday. My birthday was the next day. My father had called my school to let them know that I would be absent. While I was getting ready, I noticed that my stepsisters were also getting ready. Once I was done, my father came into my room to get my suitcase, and that's when he broke the sad news to me, and my heart actually shattered into a million pieces. My father told me that our bonding trip was now a family trip. He explained that my stepmother wanted all of us to celebrate my 16th birthday since it was such a milestone. I asked him if we could celebrate as a family after he and I went on our trip. He told me that everyone was already packed and ready to go and that it wouldn't be fair to ask them to stay behind. So, we all left for Seattle. I was sour throughout the whole trip. My father tried his best to make small talk with me, but I ignored him and acted like I was listening to music through my AirPods. I overheard my stepsisters talking about how all their friends would be super jealous that they were in Seattle for the weekend. We arrived at our Airbnb and got settled in. While I was scrolling through my phone, my father came into my room and told me we were going to grab a few burgers for dinner. I immediately lost my appetite because, beforehand, my father and I discussed checking out a few popular vegetarian-friendly restaurants. I started to complain, rightfully so, and he told me to stop acting like a spoiled child and a brat and that he wasn't going to allow my sour mood to ruin the trip. We exchanged a few more heated words, and he stormed out, yelling that I should order my dinner on Uber Eats with his credit card. And I did exactly that. Now, here I am, feeling really low. This is why I've turned to the internet for some insights on the whole situation. In your opinions, do I have the right to be annoyed with my father? I mean, he never once discussed having my stepmother and stepsisters just tag along. I'm starting to wonder and question if my father even wants me here anymore. What do you guys think? It was finally my birthday, but I honestly wish that we never went on this stupid road trip because I learned that you can't always rely on the people you're supposed to rely on. After my father and I had that heated argument, the rest of the trip was just sour. I just wanted the trip to end because this was not how I imagined my birthday weekend. While I was preparing myself breakfast, I saw that I received a birthday message from my mom. She'd always sent me a birthday message, but I never knew how to respond to it since those were the only messages I would get from her. My father wished me a happy birthday and asked what I wanted to do for the day. I told him that I wanted to check out the aquarium. Ginny groaned and said that aquariums were boring, but I ignored her and showed my father which one I wanted us to go to. I regretted choosing the aquarium because I was unable to enjoy it. My stepsisters just kept complaining the whole time we were there. They kept asking when we were going to go to the mall, and at some point, it was so irritating that I lashed out. I mean, they were ruining my day with their annoying, whiny voices. My stepmother then scolded me and asked that I not act like a spoiled brat. I could tell that my stepsisters were also annoying my dad, but he was putting up a fake happy facade, which I was used to. He hardly ever reprimanded my stepsisters and would always just take their side whenever we got into conflicts. They eventually went to check out the gift store while I continued with the tour of the aquarium. I never got to do anything I wanted because my stepsisters would always overrule me. I took many pictures and even bought myself a cool bracelet. By the time I found them by the gift shop, they had already bought half the store. My stepmother asked why I had taken so long, and I obviously just ignored her. She tried to get my father to reprimand me, but he changed the subject by suggesting that we head to the mall. My stepsisters were ecstatic when we got to the mall. They immediately rushed into an expensive clothing store. I asked my father if I could look around, but as usual, he was not paying attention to me, so I just walked off. While I was looking around, I received a message from my grandma. She was also wishing me a happy birthday, and as much as I appreciated the message, it still stung that we were no longer close. I also saw that my father had been posting a lot on Facebook, and as always, he was posting about how he was so proud of himself and how he had been raising me on his own for the past 3 years. My father's fatherhood was everything to him, and he felt like he deserved to be praised for it. I got tired of walking around and tried looking for my father and stepfamily. I couldn't find them, and I was starting to feel anxious. I called my father, but he didn't answer. I then called my stepmother and sisters, but they also didn't answer. I tried my father again, but his phone eventually just went to voicemail. Well, I started panicking, and I could feel tears welling up in my eyes. Guys, it's been an hour since I've been looking for them, and I'm still trying to find my father, but I can't help but panic. This is why I'm writing here, guys. I honestly just don't know what else to do. What should I do? Should I just continue looking for them? Here is your story with corrected spelling, grammar, and punctuation, while keeping the original context intact. Update 2. Hey guys, so a week has actually passed, and what a week it's been. I never thought I would experience anything that traumatic in my entire life. After spending exactly 2 long hours looking for my father, I saw on Joanne's Snapchat story that they were on their way back home. My body immediately froze, and I broke down in tears right there in the middle of the mall. I couldn't believe that my father had left me. I was beyond confused because how do you leave your kid? Luckily, the security guard assisted me, and since my father was not answering my calls, I had no choice but to call my mom. I had to first text her and ask if I could call, and she immediately called me back. Once I explained everything to her, she was fuming with anger and was cursing out my dad. She told me that she would book a flight and fly me out to her. The next 24 hours were obviously chaotic, as you can imagine. I had to spend the night alone at another Airbnb. My father had left all my things at the Airbnb we had been staying at, and my heart was aching and in pain. I took the first flight out, and when I noticed that I was flying back home, I was a bit confused because my mother had told me I would be staying with her. But things got cleared up once I landed. It turns out that after the divorce, my mother never left our hometown. She explained that my father had been keeping me away from her. She said that she had wanted them to split custody 50-50, but my father just agreed and told her that he would take care of me while she figured things out in life, only for him to file for sole custody and make it seem like she was an irresponsible mother to the entire court. I was shocked. I couldn't believe that my dad was the main reason I didn't have a relationship with my mom. He had made it seem like my mother never wanted me. It actually warmed my heart to know that my mom never abandoned me like my father had told me. At first, my mom wanted to confront my dad, but I asked her not to, and she agreed. However, she said that she was not going to let this slide and that it's time for her to fight for her custody rights. She then told me that I could stay with her for as many days as I wanted, which I obviously appreciated because I didn't want to go back to my dad. A couple of days later, I bumped into my stepsisters, who were obviously very confused to see me at school. I completely ignored them and continued with my day. When I got back to my mother's place, I checked my phone and saw that I had over 10 missed calls, all from my dad. I was tempted to call him back, but I fought the urge. I'm going to make my father pay for everything he has put me and my mother through for the last 3 years. I'm not going to let him get away with mistreating and neglecting me while also keeping me away from my mother. I'm going to make sure he suffers the consequences of his actions. What would you do if you were in my situation? Am I wrong for deciding to believe my mom without even knowing if she's telling the truth? I'll update you soon, guys. A few weeks have passed, and my life has been one hell of a ride. My emotions have been running sky high and really low, and honestly, I'm just hoping for the best. Everything's been going well with my mom and me, we're getting to know each other, and it's been amazing. I've always been a daddy's girl, so I hardly ever spent time with Ma while she was around, but now I'm wishing that I had spent more time with her. I even got to meet her boyfriend, Drake. He's a cool dude. I was on my way to see Grandma, who I finally confronted. She then asked if we could meet in person so she could explain her actions. We met at a small cafe, and she gave me the biggest hug. She told me how much she had missed me, how much I had grown, and the amount of love she was giving me was surprising because of all the negative comments my father had made about her. But, well, my grandmother exposed everything, and that meeting showed me how much of a liar my father was. My grandmother explained that she never wanted to cut contact with me but just couldn't stand my stepmom and her daughters. She felt they were leeches and opportunists, something my father was clearly blind to. She also mentioned that Jenna had worked as my father's PA, something I was never told about, and it all made sense now. She also told me that once she mentioned she and the family weren't fond of Jenna, he cut them off but still kept them on social media. This was refreshing to hear because my father had made it seem like it was my fault he no longer saw his family. He blamed everything on my mom and me and would constantly remind me that my mother was the reason his family no longer wanted me around. When I brought this up to my mother, she explained that the reason she even filed for divorce was because of how obsessed my father was with impressing his family. He would put her in compromising, uncomfortable situations just to impress and gain his family's favor. She explained that the reason my father had asked for sole custody of me was that he wanted to look like the perfect dad and parent to his family instead of trying to create a healthy co-parenting relationship. Well, this broke my heart because all of this could have just been avoided, but everything is making sense now. Yeah, it explains why my father was so obsessed with being the perfect father to my stepsisters. It was because he wanted to look like a hero who had taken in kids with no dad. I've always known my father's reputation meant so much to him, but not to this extent. So, I devised a little plan with my mother and grandma. We were going to expose my father for the monster he actually was, and we were going to do that by destroying the one thing he truly loved, his reputation. Do you guys think I'm taking this plan of retaliation too far? Should I just let it go and continue living with my mother? I feel like he needs a taste of his own medicine, but let me know what you guys think. Update: a long week has passed since I met up with my grandmother, and I was actually starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. I've been staying with my mom for over a month, and because my father had no idea where she lived, he could not get access to me. My mother, Drake, and I were on our way to my grandmother's house. She was hosting a barbecue, and the whole family would be there, including my father and stepfamily. This was all part of the plan. My father had absolutely no clue we were going to go. We arrived and found everybody just outside. My grandma waved at us, and my father's face turned ghostly white. He'd been bragging about what an amazing father he was to a few of his family members, and I then found out that he had told everyone I was sick with the flu, which was why I couldn't come with him to the function. My grandmother then asked my father, "Well, why are you lying?" My father couldn't even utter a word, so I decided to talk for him. I exposed him. I told everyone that my father was nothing more than a liar. He abandoned me. My stepmother immediately intervened, called me such a little liar, and then said the reason I was with my mom was because I had run away from home. My mother took out her phone and showed everyone the text messages from the day of the incident. One of my father's cousins gasped in shock and asked him, "How could you have done this, leaving her in a whole different state?" My grandmother shook her head in disappointment and told my father she was so sick of this, disgusted by his actions. My father tried to explain, but nobody was trying to listen. My great-aunt looked at my dad and told him he's a disgrace to this family. Well, this sent my stepmother over the edge, and she snatched my mother's phone out of her hand, smashing it onto the floor into a million pieces. She started calling me and my mother all kinds of names, but the one that made my mother flip out was when she called me, well, a fatherless child. My mother immediately slapped her and then asked my father why he wasn't defending me. Instead of defending me, my father decided to confess to one of his wrongdoings. He clarified that the reason he had left me at the mall was because my stepmother had started a fight with him about me and had forced him to take them back home. He said that my stepmom had threatened to leave him and that he couldn't afford another divorce because he was already ashamed and embarrassed about his divorce with my mother. However, my grandma did not fall for his little tactic. She told him that she had warned him about my stepmother, but he didn't listen. Everybody was now looking at my father with disappointment on their faces, and I could tell he couldn't stand it. He started blaming me for everything, falsely accusing me of being nothing more than a rebellious teenager. My mother could not take my father's lies a second longer, so she decided to drop the biggest bombshell ever. She told my father that she had filed for sole custody of me. My stepmother cheered joyfully at the news, but my father fell to his knees and started begging my mother not to take me away from him. He knew that if she took me away, his perfect father reputation would be entirely tarnished. He then got up and started shouting at my stepmom, blaming her straight up for ruining his relationship and his family, saying that if it weren't for her, he would still be close to them. As my stepmom was about to defend herself, my father just stormed off. She froze for a few moments and then tried to chase after him, but by the time she even got to him, he had already driven down the street. Did I take things too far? I mean, all I did was expose my father's lies. It's not like I lied about his actions or anything, right? 5 months later, since the barbecue and the retaliation, a lot has gone down, and it's taken me a while to get used to it all. I was slowly starting to adjust to everything and actually felt more at peace with everything that happened. I was officially living with my mother full-time. She decided it would be best for everything to go through the court, and it actually worked in her favor. Once the judge heard that my father had abandoned me at the mall, she sided with my mother and granted her primary custody. We're still learning about each other, and it feels good to be in a home where there's no toxicity. Drake is even a great stepdad, and I'm grateful my mother found someone who puts her first. Also, I'm super excited because I'm going to be an older sister soon. My mother and Drake are expecting my little sister. On the other hand, my father is going through a nasty divorce with Jenna. She was trying to get her hands on half of his estate, and apparently, she's drowning in legal fees. I have to admit, my father was smart for marrying her out of the community of property, meaning she wasn't entitled to anything. But because she quit her job and became a housewife, she was sort of entitled to something. But here's the kicker, my father was telling everyone they were divorcing because she cheated. It was a lie. Jenna was a lot of things, but she was not a cheater. I believe he started this rumor just to save his reputation because he was embarrassed about getting another divorce in less than 5 years. Unfortunately, none of his family wanted anything to do with him because of how poorly he treated me while married to Jenna. They said that eventually, they would forgive him, but for now, he wasn't even allowed at family events.